Startling new revelations from those leaked intelligence documents. The latest about a long-standing ally in the Middle East, Egypt. The Washington Post reporting that in one document dated February 17th, it shows Egyptian President El-Sisi secretly planning to supply rockets to Russia, ordering production of 40,000 rockets and instructing officials to keep the production and shipments secret to, quote, avoid any problems with the West. We know who the West is. Joining us now is Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama. So we're learning a lot more from the leaked classified documents. We at NBC have seen some of them. The New York Times first broke this story. Reports now that Egypt was planning on sending rockets to Russia. We spend billions of dollars on aid to Egypt, second only to, in the Middle East, second only to Israel, as you know. So what should the U.S. do going forward?
Andrea, I mean, I just don't think that the U.S. can be providing Egypt with the level of military support and assistance that it does in this context. I mean, there were already, dating back to the Obama years, difficult decisions to send military equipment to Egypt because of its abysmal human rights record. Frankly, personally, I opposed some of those deliveries for that reason. When you add to this geopolitical bombshell, really, if true, of Egypt essentially arming Russia in a war that the United States has described as existential, really, to the international order, that is a recipient, the second largest recipient of U.S. military assistance, actively working against the number one U.S. foreign policy priority right now. And I think it also speaks generally, Andrea, to this question in the Middle East, where you see Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, traditional U.S. partners, kind of sitting this one out or playing both sides. These are autocratic systems who might feel like their future is more secure, not with the U.S. that is describing a battle between democracy and autocracy, but, in the autocratic camp.
Well, in fact, since the Camp David Accords in 1978, just to circle back to Egypt for a moment, the U.S. has provided Egypt $50 billion in military aid and $30 billion in economic assistance. So the red flags that you talk about certainly now are going to be raised. U.S. taxpayers' money to a country that is trying to send the supply line of rockets, according to these documents. The Pentagon says the leaked documents, Ben, pose a serious risk to security. There seems to be an obvious risk if the documents are correct about Ukraine, saying how much weaker Ukraine is. This undermines President Zelensky's bargaining position down the road with Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, but I think that this is something that analysts have been somewhat aware of over the last several months. Part of the reason that Zelensky made such a full court press for additional support for tanks, for planes, for ammunition, for anything he could get, is that it was quite clear that he needed to rearm to have a chance to mount these offensives in the spring that are going to be critical to establishing Ukraine's position at a potential negotiating table. I think what's striking about these documents, Andrea, is that these are very high-level U.S. intelligence reports. As someone who used to get the presidential daily briefing, these are reports that are dealing with the most pressing and sensitive international issues, right? So, this isn't kind of secondary reporting. These aren't just kind of diplomatic cables that are routine. These are, these are documents that are describing things that are happening in real time that are at the top of the priority list. And obviously, Ukraine is part of that. And what you're concerned about is both the optic of this information being public, the signal that Ukraine's military might be in difficult circumstances, but also the Ukrainians want to trust us, that when they supply us with information about the status of their forces, that can be kept secret. And so that's where you also have an additional challenge for the administration.
The other question that I was going to raise is, how could this have been online for weeks and weeks without U.S. intelligence knowing until it was publicly, published Bellingcat? How did they not know this was out there? The president was only briefed on April 6th.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think that we're in a new world of information warfare, Andrea, where all kinds of stuff is online. There's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of fake intelligence documents from different services. So it could be that this was in the kind of dark web in the netherworld, but actually some of this stuff was, on Telegram channels. I think it speaks to the volume of information that is out there. But I think that as you're looking for the security breach that happened here, you want to know, how did this go missing? Was this part of a broader compromise of U.S. systems, or was this just essentially one file or compendium of files that went missing? And then, why did it take so long for us to determine that this stuff was out there when clearly other people were making use of this information?
And do we have to restrict access to these top secrets, no foreign intel use, to a smaller group of people?
I think that you want to look at operational security. And so, for instance, there's already a shift to digitization so that, people are getting briefings on iPads, for instance, instead of carrying around folders of documents that can go physically missing easier. I think they'll be looking at operational security. But yeah, they'll also be looking at information. The reality, though, is, Andrea, if you're talking about the Pentagon, there are a lot of people that do need to know these things. There are a lot of people, for instance, that work on the Egypt relationship that need to know that this partner is considering sending rockets to Russia. There are a lot of people that would need to know the state of Ukraine's forces. So at the end of the day, it's hard to kind of restrict access too tightly, but you can look at operational security. And we've discussed this in the context of the Trump documents as well, of course.
Ben Rhodes, thank you very much. Obviously a huge problem for the U.S. government and the intelligence community.